Okay, I guess we're going to start. So everybody, welcome. By the way, for the latecomers, there's a video screen in the back that you could watch the entire workshop and event tonight. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this obviously overpacked, oversell-out event tonight. And I'd like just to give you a brief overview of Exceed Network for the people that don't know about us, and for some of the people that do, the new revised Exceed Network. So as you can see, we're the community business platform. For over the last 14 years, we've been giving advice. That's our core feature that we do through a platform of experienced business leaders. We service the community in consumer goods and service industries, technology, and the like. The second area that we're involved in is workshops and seminars like you see tonight. So we have an incredible line of events throughout the year. We hit branding, real estate, marketing, off-price, e-commerce, and everything relevant to our core advisory services that we offer. We did about 2 years ago, we entered a partnership with WeWork, and we have a startup incubator, bless you. We have a startup incubator that we started actually in Brooklyn, and we moved to Manhattan about a year ago. And we have 16 dedicated workspaces, and we have a dozen companies in there that we help and we mentor on a daily basis. And if anybody's interested in that type of a situation, please see myself, or the board members. Harry Towell's here, Kim Dabb is here, Emily's staff is around. So that I'd like to make you aware of that. That's a growing piece of what we do. We also have the Women Exceed, which is we serve the women in the community in various industries, in culinary, service, and it's a growing piece. We also, as for further information, we have, being in Manhattan, we recently opened up an outpost at the Well in Brooklyn, New York, and women could be serviced and seen at that location, so please pass that on. Tonight's event, obviously, there's a lot of interest in, and we thank everybody for coming. And at this point, I would like to introduce a board member, someone who's involved extremely in our organization, someone who I like a lot, Harry Towell.
Thanks, sir.
All right, so just one note, please, the cell phones, if everybody could just, silence them, that'll be great.
Hi, everybody. My name is Harry Towell. I'm the program director at Exceed and CEO of Q4 Designs. And being that my company is primarily in seasonal businesses, I understand the value of working and doing business with the off-price community. So tonight's event is focused on 3 topics: preparation for a meeting, how to identify whether or not your product is appropriate for off-price, preparation, right? and building relationships. And I think these are 3 very important topics. And first, I'd like to introduce Kim Romano to talk about preparation.
So my name is Kim Romano. Just to give you a little history on who I am, I started my career in a department store, one of the major department stores out there. After that, I worked for a little over 10 years at one of the big box off-price retailers. And now for the last 8 years, I've been working at a 600 chain off-price urban store. What I'm going to discuss with you guys is prepping for your meeting and why it's important and what's important to prep for your meeting. I think the number one rule when walking into a meeting and working with buyers and merchants is you want to keep it simple, you want to keep it smooth, and you want to not make anything difficult. You want the buyers to enjoy coming into your showroom and looking forward to coming into your showroom. Some really important points when you are working with the buyers is, have you shopped their floor before? Are you familiar with their store, and have you been in it? were you in it a few years ago, or have you been in it recently? Do you understand their product mix? Do you understand their price points? And do you understand who they're trying to obviously get to buy your merchandise? Does your merchandise fill a void within their mix? Do you know who your competition is that sits in the store that you're going to be sitting next to? Are you prepared with costs that work for your buyers? And not only are you prepared with costs, but you understand just their margin implications. Are you sitting there trying to sell them outerwear when you should be selling them t-shirts this time of year?
Yes.
Have you discussed with them before they came in what their needs are? A lot of you in this audience, I've actually done a decent amount of business with and have done and do business with now. So do you have a very large line, and are you showing them everything, or do you know what they're focused in on? Again, keeping it simple, don't overwhelm, because then it can keep you off track to really what the buyer's looking for and what you're trying to sell them. Do you have samples, or are you working off of CADs? I think it's really important when you're trying to sell something to let somebody touch and feel the product. I think that makes it, is it the order or is it not the order? And then, are you very prepared with what your deliveries are? Do you know exactly when it's coming in and when it's shipping, or are you showing something and then, the production hasn't even started overseas? And, are you looking for current goods, or are you looking for future goods? So I think, it's really important that as you're prepping for a meeting, you have the conversations with the buyers before they come in and really zone and focus yourself in to help you organize your points of what you're going to go over during that time period. Obviously, we bounce, from time to time, and there's times you spend a half an hour in the market, and there's times you're 3 hours in the market. I think the more focused and organized you could be, it just makes our life a lot more simple. And most importantly, know your costs. If you go through this entire meeting and then at the end, you said, well, I don't know where I'm going to be cost, it's kind of like, you stop the entire process. And you need to always have a ballpark and kind of know where you're going to be. And if you don't, it just kind of, okay, then you leave, and then it's, you kind of have to start the process all over again. So those are really the things that I think, I would recommend as you guys are prepping and getting us into the showrooms. I'm going to hand it over to you, Eli.
Okay. I was about to ask you the questions that you just gave every answer to. So very well done, without the questions. Excellent. So I'm a board member. I'm Eli Edid. I'm a board member, the newest board member of Exceed. It's an amazing organization. I'm very happy that all of you showed up, so thank you very much for coming to listen. My primary goal at Exceed is to run the incubator and to help young entrepreneurs succeed and learn from early pitfalls and get up and try to figure out and navigate a way through this crazy business. I was doing it a lot informally, and then when Erwin and Harry put the full court press on, I signed on, and I'm very happy to say that there's an amazing group of young people, and I ask you to ask young people that need help to come to us, because I'm more than willing and able to help those who need help. I also said I'm the founder and president of Cutie Pie Baby. We're a $50 million baby and kids company, so I understand that market really well. I'm also the CEO and the founder of a brand called RBX. I manage 20 licensees. So I see all sorts of the spectrum in the off-price channel, and I've been doing this for about 25, 30 years. So I'm here to help tonight to discuss anything that you guys want to learn from these buyers, and I'm just going to roll right into a few more questions.
You just demoted them.
Yeah.
No buyers.
Okay.
What?
They're not buyers. Yeah.
Right, merchants, excuse me, I'm sorry. So Kim, you were very insightful, and I understand that you, when you're looking for a new supplier, what are some of the things and the characteristics that you sort of to help everybody here in the audience understand, like I can't sell this company. How do I become a new supplier? What are some of the things that you could help them sort of categorize as important things?
The number one thing is knowing who your customer is that you're trying to sell, and don't ever try to sell anybody unless you have shopped their store, which is something that I've said in the past. And if you really believe that you could fill a void in somebody's floor, then you set up the meeting and you put your best foot forward. Do you have a good reputation? Do you do business with some of our competition? Have we seen you out there before? Are you a startup? And if you're a startup, why do you think you should be part of our company? But I think your reputation and knowing your product and selling somebody sitting on our side is very important, especially if you believe you could fill a void. If you're just going to be another one of T-shirts when it might be our biggest category, well then sell us your T-shirts, but make sure you can explain to us why you are so different and belong in our mix.
What's a tip-off
Thank you.
to know that the person hasn't shopped your stores?
When you ask. When was the last time you
When they're
asked
showing us product. So like I said, I work for an urban off-price retailer. So if you're going to start showing me a lot of styles that relate to surf and skate, that would just make us obviously want to get up and walk out the door.
You hear that? That's great. So also, I know a lot of companies are sort of in this in-between position where they want to sell you, even if it's identified as the proper merchandise. Can you tell everybody what it's like to shop a line that is inventory-based versus only cut to order? I know a lot of companies struggle between those 2 points. Should I bring in the inventory? Do they need to have inventory? What's your take on that?
I think there's enough big boxed retailers out there that you should always have some kind of inventory on hand. I think it's very important that if you want to get your first order, it's most likely nobody's going to give you a cutting for 90 to 120 days. But everybody always has a need for the right product, especially in the off-price arena. So there's never not money in the off-price arena if it's the right product. And if you have it on hand, 9 out of 10 times you're going to get the order tomorrow for showing somebody something that's so fabulous and saying it's not going to be here for 90 days.
So you encourage them to buy some inventory, but not overstock some of their,
Everybody
style
should
by style.
always have some inventory
Okay.
on hand.
So when do you feel it's appropriate to buy off CADs as opposed to samples?
Is this a question directed at me?
Sorry, it's open to the panel.
I would answer it by if it's a top 5 or a top 10 vendor and it's somebody that I do a lot of business with, obviously you could buy off of CADs. If it's somebody that's a really small vendor or that you're opening up or you do business with just a few times a year, I think products to touch and feel is 100% necessary. I do think the worst thing to do is to buy a store-bought sample and throw your label over it just to try to give a representation of this is what I could do. It's okay to do if you have 10 samples and 5 of them are yours and then 5 of them are this is what the next delivery is going to look like. But very important, I think, to have samples hanging.
But just in general, we're merchants and our industry is all about product. So at the end of the day, the product comes first. So I would just say as a general statement, not having product and just delivering CADs is not going to get you very far in general because, there's a lot of really not great CADs out there and the product looks so much better. So you're selling yourself short when you don't have samples.
Kim, another one for you. What's your take on sharing sell-throughs with some of your suppliers and maybe some of your closer partners? How do you differentiate who you give that information to, who you don't give it to? I know it's a big gray area. It's not very black and white.
I think it's very dependent on who the company is that you work for. There's definitely a lot of rules out there. This specific company that I'm with today, if it's an upfront vendor, and like I said, if it's a top 5 volume vendor, we happen to share a lot of information. We don't necessarily send selling reports, but I think the more knowledgeable we can make the market when it comes to off-price and upfront selling can only make us both smarter, because are we selling stuff great that is at factory A versus factory B? I think that's very important. So we might not necessarily say this turned on a 3, but we'll hone in and say, okay, this entire grouping, X, Y, and Z did really well. We should probably expand upon this classification or category.
So everyone knows turning on a 3. Turning on a 3 means it's a 3-week turn. It turns in 3 weeks, which is unheard of. It's like a unicorn.
That's the standard.
Yeah, that's the standard. Okay. So what else would they get out of that? So if you were to share it, the advantages would be that they could design product that will sell, just as good, and you'll keep getting more of that. I just want to.
Right. I mean, they should understand what colors are working. If I'm going to go in and make an upfront buy and try to program out some goods, I'm going to share with them my best-selling colors, my best-selling silhouettes, and maybe reference their top 3 to 5 styles of what they have on the floor with me. If gold is selling better than silver, just because you want that first conceptual meeting to be very easy. You don't want them wasting their time and energy building all of this product that isn't appropriate for you. In retrospect, you also want to see newness, so you want to have that whole concept. And that's, again, when you're writing goods in advance. When you're talking about goods that you're coming in and buying off price, I don't necessarily believe that there's that much sharing of information, because every deal is a different deal.
Great, thank you. I'm going to introduce Keith right now. Keith has a very interesting relationship. He was on both sides. He was a buyer and supplier, so he really has insight into both markets. Keith.
Hi, everybody. I know a lot of you guys just from being on both sides. A lot of familiar faces. 28 years in the industry. Roughly half-half on the buy side. Started baseline department store, won't name names. Then I went to off-price, about a 2,000 door off-price chain, and kind of got recruited out of that to this side. I've been where I've been with Harry actually for the last little above a case pack, 13 years over there, and run a few businesses for him. And it's actually great being on both sides, because you kind of can see and perceive a lot of things and how meetings are going and how buyers are taking things. The one thing, and I'm going to get into topics, but I think right off the bat, the one commonality that I'm seeing and hearing here is shopping. And when I talk, just what my subject is product, you're going to find that shopping is not armchair shopping. Just because you're sitting at your desk, you're on the internet, and you're clicking on somebody's website that you're meeting with, that ain't shopping. You got to get into the stores. You got to go. You got to look at clearance, see what's on their clearance. And this is how you differentiate what's going to work in your product and what's not going to work in your product. You can't go on the internet and say, yeah, and pull a sketch. Oh, yeah, I shopped your store. It doesn't work. And a smart merchant will eat you up and chew you out very quickly if you play that, and if they ever find out that you played that. And you're probably going to lose your opportunities to do business with them down the road. So it's really important, and sometimes it's not demographically feasible to hit some of these stores because they're southern chains or wherever they are. You got to make best efforts. And if you don't, and if you can't, just be honest and be forthright with it. So just some advice. And again, shopping is something you're going to continually hear. So from the product side, it's funny, you go back to business school and you get the 3 Ps in marketing: product, price, and promotion. So placement is another one, depending on what business school you went to. One thing. Maybe I didn't learn that well. But product, price, promotion / placement is key. Know your product. And another thing, know not only who you're selling to, but who their competitors are. More than anything, you sit and we can talk about t-shirts, you can talk about polos, you can talk about jeans. They're all commodities. Know what the competition is at, so that when you're sitting there and you can almost have a grid built that says, hey, this is where I am, this is what I'm offering. The devil is in the details. You have your gram weights down, whether you're combed cotton, whether you're carded, whether you're ring spun denim, whatever it is, that's part of your selling. You know, it was amazing that we were in a meeting a few weeks back, and it was probably one of the most impressive meetings I've ever been in, where we purchased and I don't take responsibility for this, one of our salespeople purchased every single item on this person's floor, legitimately went to the store, laid up every single piece of each individual item that was on their floor, and then we had counter samples that were made of what we had. And we lined up next to each one, and the buyer just sat there, and we're not talking about a small buyer, probably the largest pencil in the United States, so do the math. And the buyer was mesmerized, absolutely blown away, because you did your homework, you laid everything out, you went to the store, you had the product laid out, you had the differentiating points, what made it better, where you could price it to be better, to be advantageous. So again, it's about doing your homework, it's about placement. I like acronyms. One of the off-prices that I worked with, they were all driven by acronyms. So they had a formula, and I could say the formula because I don't work for them anymore. 2,000 store off-price chain, so you could probably figure that out. New England-ish based, so now you got it. They had a formula, and it's FBQV. So if you were at the previous Exceed event, I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but it's really a great mantra. Fashion, brand, quality, value. So when you're building your product, you have to have all of that in mind. Fashion's relative, value's relative. You know, everybody looks at things different. You have people here wearing Cucinelli, you have people here wearing Bonobos. So fashion is relative, value is relative. But when you're working with an off-price buyer, their job is to denigrate your product. Their job is to take your product down so that they could push and get the best possible price. So by doing what you're supposed to be doing, you can kind of counter that intelligently and with the strategy and work through it. You had in the FPQ formula, each thing valued 5 points. So the perfect score would be 20. And you want to strive for that 20. You want to be fashion right. If you can attach your brand to it, great. If you can't, it's okay. But make sure your value is there and your quality is there so you get the placement on the product end. Progressiveness in your product, being innovative in your product, testing your product. You know, everything, we're in the kids wear industry, a lot of us, and you got to test your goods. I'm talking full run, lead. I'm not even saying just to be compliant. Go above and beyond the compliance. You will mesmerize a buyer walking in and saying, you know what? I had some stuff tested, certified testing labs. There's a few of them here in New York. It's worth the investment if you're pitching and going after a big program. It is small money comparative to the return that you get, and I highly, highly recommend it. So testing, being out there, I'll just look to notes. Keep your passion off your sleeve, meaning your passion's in your product, and know your product forwards and backwards. We spent countless hours perfecting a polo. One of our brands is a polo brand. So we've spent, I would say, no less than 1,000 hours getting a polo done the right way. Fabric, details, trims, band roll collars so the collar doesn't roll, taping, details. The devil is in the details and in differentiating your product. And that is what will set you apart, and that will give you the edge when you're meeting, and everybody wants the same thing, and everybody's kind of pitching the same thing. But if you could really present it in a way that you make it a no-brainer, for the buyer and for the divisional, and are prepared with it, that makes an absolutely tremendous difference. Shopping, actually, to Kim's point again, shopping, preparation, knowledge to your position and where you're positioning your product on their floor. Be ready to talk about price points when you're meeting with buyers, divisionals, because that shows that you did your homework, that shows that you care. Figure out a way to know their markup structure. Everybody works differently. Some off prices are in the mid-40s to 46-ish is one in particular. Some guys are 50s. You got to sell them at 50 points. They got to make 50 points. you kind of should know that coming in, and there's enough people in the room to network with to say, hey, what does this guy work at? What does that guy work at? You know, if they're doing a pack-away deal, you know, where do they work? So know that going in, and then it all goes back to the, you know, working with the product. I talked about testing, presentation. Be proud, not boastful. This is off a product, but I have to say it. Because on the buy side, I've had plenty of experiences where I walked in, you know, into appointments and people had great product, but the attitude wasn't there and the trust was lost immediately. So you walk into a showroom, you got to be humble, but proud, and you have to find that fine line of being proud of your product, but also being humble. Buyers hate arrogance because they deal with it every day in senior management, and they're always being criticized. You know, you could turn faster, you can sell better, you can get better return. So just, you gotta be humble, you gotta be prepared, know your product, know your gram weights, know where you're sourcing, know that you're in factories that are compliant, especially when you're with brands. Those are the key things for me for product.
So talk to me about how you discuss your competition's product.
So, elaborate.
What is appropriate and inappropriate to say about your competition
So you never want to bash.
as a wholesaler?
Yeah, thank you. You never want to bash, you know, and it's funny, as we had things laid out, you know, you're almost looking at a buyer and you're saying, if this keeps reverbing, I'm going to lose it. You know, I'll turn this way. So you have to find that fine line again of not bashing and not denigrating a product, because you're really insulting the buyer. You know, you're insulting their pick. You're insulting what they built, what they put their time, sometimes after hours time into. So you got to be super, super careful, super cautious, and super factual. Don't speculate. Don't get emotional. You know, this is the best thing in the world. You can't do that. You know, shop your floor. Well, I'm at 190 GSM, you're 170 GSM. I'm using fully combed, you're using carded, you're using open end. You got to be factual. You got to take the emotion out of it so that you could show that you have an advantage, and it's a factual advantage, not a subjective or a emotional advantage.
What are some good, now I'm asking questions. So what are some good tactics when a buyer is asking you who do you think your competition is? How do you know that if you don't know exactly what they have per se or what they're doing?
You wing it. No, kidding. Kidding. Again, it goes back to shopping. It goes back to being in the stores. I keep saying armchair shopping doesn't work. Being in the stores, being out there. I'm trained to go to clearance when I shop. Like, the first thing that big New England chain teaches you to do is go to the clearance runs. And you learn a lot from clearance. I'm sure everybody up here on that end of it will say the same. You just go one by one. You know, why is it sitting here? Is it seasonally incorrect? Is it colored off? Is there a quality issue? Is it just freaking ugly? Like, what is it? Like, what didn't work here? So just, again, being out in the stores is kind of just knowing what you're up against, what your other competition is out in those categories that you're up against is key.
So being a manager or owning your own business, obviously you're hiring people all the time. How do you identify high potential employees? What are some of the skill sets that you look for?
Resumes are funny. I kind of bottom up a resume pretty quickly. I've seen thousands of resumes, and having somebody in front of you and just asking very open-ended, candid questions, and, you know, what would people say about you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? We all go through those ends of it, and, you know, it's a tricky proposition. You know, on paper you could put anything you want to put about yourself on paper. Asking really open-ended questions that make somebody think, putting them on the spot, changing direction very quickly on an interview, where you're talking about, hey, how's your family, how's this, and then going right into, so what was the best business move you ever made? What's the biggest mistake you've ever made? What's your single biggest regret in your life, both personally and professionally? And you just keep rotating and you keep moving in and out of personal and then back into business. And you could really see what you're getting as a candidate. Are they fast on their feet? Are they open-ended? Are they forward-thinking? You know, are they detailed? How are they answering their questions? Are they shifting in their chair? What's their body language? Again, this New England company I keep referring to, you had to take 2 months of classes about body language. And legitimately, if you were in management training, moving up into a DMM level, you had to sit through these classes and learn about people and how to read people, and are people closed? Are they closing up on you? And body language was a tremendous, tremendous thing. And even on interviews, I actually had an interview today. I was interviewing somebody and was watching the way she was reacting to some of the questions. Was she closing? Was she opening? Was she this? How were her eyes? Did she shift over? So you got to just change it up. Change up the questions. Keep it fast. Go personal. Go professional. And that to me is just, bottom up the resume fast.
So last one, going back to product. What are some of the first steps that you take when putting together a product line at the beginning of a season?
So we look at, I look at it as a retailer, which is, for me, the easiest thing in the world. I look at, and systemically we have the infrastructure to do that. I look at what we made money on, because bottom line, why are we all here? To make money. So you don't need to be in business on product you don't make money on. Why do it? Why put your hard-earned money out there? So we look at turn, we look at gross margin, and we look at the monster categories. So I use a thrust, maintain, downtrend strategy, which is really an old department store strategy, because you only have X amount of dollars to spend in your business, right? Everything can't be a thrust. So let's say denim jeans, let's say you're doing a full line of sportswear. So you have categories, denim jeans, you have tops, whatever else there is, wovens, knits. You look at margin, we look at the size first, then the margin. We've made some decisions in some categories that, we don't need to be in that business because we're not making money. And you'll have people come in and retailers will come in and say, hey, do you have denim? Do you have this? Do you have that? There's times that we just won't have it because the buys weren't opportunistic enough for us to make money. And you don't need to be everything to everybody. If you try that, you will surely fail. So just know your market, know your niche, know your categories that you're making money on, churning and getting your return on your investment.
Thank you. I'm going to, that was a lot. That was amazing. Sorry, guys. No, thank you. That was amazing. Still trying to figure out who that 2,000 store chain and.
Yeah, I know. I don't know who that is.
It'll come to me. So she spoke a little, she's asking questions, but I want to just introduce everybody to Martha. Martha?
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and be a part of Exceed tonight. My name is Martha Seeger, and I have been a merchant in Off-Price for 12 years. And it's been really exciting to be a part of Off-Price and see how aggressively the industry has grown in those 12 years. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about what I think is the most important topic, vendor relationships. And essentially, vendor relationship is the key ingredient to our industry, which really, when you think about it, is a service industry. It's one of the most common sense and routine everyday practices, and yet it's one of the most difficult to master. Like any personal relationship or friendship, business relationships are built on the same core values: honesty, dignity, trust, and respect. The concept is really simple. What you give is what you get. When both parties have the same end goal and are willing to work towards getting there, anything is really possible. Knowing and accepting that there are going to be give and take situations, there's going to be bumps in the road. Knowing that it's not about one order or one season, but acknowledging that building a business together takes partnership, it takes effort, patience, and a lot of times takes compromise. I'm sure everyone in this room has a relationship in their lives where they can apply the things that I'm saying. And like I said, it's still most commonly practiced, but the hardest to master and to balance. The most common mistake that people make is taking those simple values for granted or assuming the relationship is stronger than maybe it is. Because of the comfortable society that we live in, it gets misconstrued easily that business relationships can be treated in the same manner. In reality, you will get much further when you exude the utmost respect and avoid the hey buddy and what's up attitude. Being honest about where your relationship is and knowing your audience is critical. Trust me when I say that no one has ever said he or she rubbed me the wrong way because he or she was too respectful. If you take anything away from relationships tonight and my advice, please take with you that vendor relationships can be the most rewarding piece of your job. It can also be something that could make or break your business or your career. It's the same values and the same concept as building a relationship or building a life together with someone. It takes time, trust, respect, common drive, and hard work and attention. In the end, though, it is something that will make or break you. It may save you, and it's definitely rewarding.
That was great, Martha.
Thanks.
So I've been doing this a long time, and emails weren't around when I first started. Fax machines were just becoming non-coily. So I remember most of my early years, I had a salesman's guide, and I had a Rolodex, and I would just go through the phone calls.
Yeah.
The salespeople that I employ.
Oh,
come on,
that's very good timing.
She's canceling your order. The salespeople and the culture today is very, very different. It's almost like odd for people to feel like they need to make a phone call as opposed to send an email. It's so easy. Send a text. What do you think the difference today, and what could you give advice as someone who decides to actually pick up the phone versus an email? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's so simple because if you think about it, how many emails do we get in one day? You're a dime a dozen. You get 1,000 emails, you get 1,000 text messages, but when you really think about it, even in your personal life, who do you actually talk to on the phone? The most important people in your life. Your mom, your dad, your wife, whoever. So when a vendor or a buyer picks up the phone and calls, that really stands out in your mind. It stands out in my mind because you thought I was that important to pick up the phone and call instead of shooting off an email. And I think it's easy to, say, oh, I'm so busy, but sending an email, picking up the phone while you're, walking down the street really takes the same amount of time. And it just really shows that you care. Sorry.
So how do you differentiate yourself when you are sending an email?
It's that fine balance between, sharing personal information and not. And again, it depends on and being honest about what relationship you have with that person. But remembering small details is how I always differentiate myself. Maybe they just got married or they just got a dog or something like that. I mean, that does stand out because it makes you feel like, oh, you actually remembered our last conversation versus did I get the order?
You tend to miss all the small talk when there's an email, right?
Right.
It's just automatically, hey, how are you? And you go right to the point.
Where are my goods?
Right.
Yeah.
When you pick up the phone, it's how was your weekend? And then, somebody will say, oh, I had my kid's soccer game, or I
Right.
took my wife into the city. And then, you might get a great restaurant tip. I mean,
Right.
that simple 5 minutes of small talk, it also just helps you build relationships versus just
Right.
emails are very short and to the point. So it helps you build relationships.
Yeah.
To your point, the most important thing.
I mean, at the end of the day, business is business, and we all have to do first what's right for the business. But at the same time, we're all still just people trying to do our best, working towards the same end goal. How do we do more business? How do we make more money? But we're all still people too. So like Kim said, it just kind of shows that you care in more ways than one.
For those of you that are questioning whether or not you want to be in the off-price arena, I know a lot of people, it's obvious, but some people really don't get the fact that if you have the value and you could source the right way and you have the right designs, you could do so much more business than the traditional mid-tier players and the others. So while I was preparing, I asked my CFO to give you guys a visual to what it looks like when you receive a check from a department store or a mid-tier player versus with an off-price guy. So the first thing he said is, we don't even get checks from the off-pricers. They just wire the money. I'm like, find me a check. I want to show them the difference. But yeah, so this is what it looks like when you get a check from a department store. This is all the deductions. You know what you're getting into when you sell the off-price market. They're sharp, you're sharp. Everybody knows there's no games, there's no high-low. It's what I would call down and dirty business.
Basics.
If you could hit the price points and you could give them what Keith was saying with his acronym, you will do the business. And it's about the sell-throughs, and it's about giving the relationships and the product the honest truth. Successful companies don't lie to their buyers. Successful companies are upfront with their buyers. They tell them ahead of the problem. They don't wait until there's a problem and then they can't react to it. So that's just a courteous, smart, logical things that most people don't do, but it really makes a difference in relationship building. Any questions?
Do you want to open up to the floor?
Yeah, please.
Anyone have questions?
Hi. 2017 was a tough year, Marmax being one of my biggest customers. We had an exceptional business every year before that. 2017 was not business as usual. So considering that we really, really worked very, very tight, margins was so below, and we had to get through a tough year. So now we're in the new year. How do you power back up after being, your prices being sliced and diced, and we need to meet these retails, and we need, everything that I was selling was a little like over 20%, sometimes 30%
Wow, that's
less.
fantastic. We don't get that.
So, it's just coming back strong for the new year. So far, I've shipped goods in January. But business is not as usual. We're a luggage company. We do luggage, we do baggage, handbags, and I'm the merchandiser. I travel overseas more than I'd like to, and I'm like the sourcing queen from hell, because I believe as you get challenged with pricing, you really have to source away, so that that you're always able to stay in the game and be able to price something at every price level you need to price it at. It's just really, what's the comeback?
Do you have someone specific you were asking, or do you want us to just figure out?
I think what's important is always planting seeds. What we call is, you have your big animals, but sometimes things happen to those big animals, and then you can't always depend on them. I mean, something like that normally doesn't happen year after year. You probably hit, and then you build up from there. But who are those seeds that you planted with the other buyers, the other stores out there that you did this much with that you can now triple? So if you have the 3 guys that you're going to triple, is it going to make up for some of the losses? So I think the most important thing is knowing who the small guys are and who you can keep. You have your big guys, you say you keep milking your big guys, and then who are the new people that you're planting seeds with? And those seeds suddenly have to, move to the next level, and you have to continue to build upon them. So I think it's the same thing when we buy. We want to make sure we don't get too dependent on one person. God forbid their delivery slides, who else is going to back us? So hopefully go forward, you'll have enough smaller people that you're working with, where then you find the opportunity that you could, build a little bit quicker to help make up for that loss.
Okay, we're going to take 4 more questions. Anyone else?
Hi. What percentage of your business is allocated for upfront buys, and what percent is allocated for chasing liquidity in the market?
Did everyone hear that? He wants to know what percentage of the dollars are committed upfront versus what percentage of the dollars are liquid. There's some proprietary issues there, but generally speaking, I think most of the off-pricers like to leave 50% of their budget, depending on the year and the category. It could be a lot more in a sensitive, because pack and holds put a big dent in those numbers. So if Q4 had loaded up some big box people, they probably already have 90% committed up front because it was a closeout. But I would say 50-50 is the best rule of thumb. I don't know what category you're in, but
It depends on the area. I mean, it really significantly, if you're, like, what area you're talking about? What area you're talking about specifically?
Oh, like what product?
Yeah, like what category?
Dresses.
So dresses are fast, dresses are fashion, dresses, then, again, up in New England, they wanted to turn on 3s and 4s. That's the norm. So they're going to do very little what's called type 1s, very little upfronts with you. They're going to do, or anybody in the market. It might actually be inverse. It might actually be 20, 25% upfront type 1s, and it might be 30 to 70%, 75% in season, kind of quick turn and burn deals. So it really does vary on the area.
sometimes one company may give 100%. I've seen 100% upfronts all the time. That happens too.
It's another part.
You have to understand that off-price, the beauty of off-price is that we do react to the business, so we all have to react to it together. And it's also, there's a lot of gray in off-price. There is no set formula. So like they were saying, it really depends on the season, it depends on the category, it depends on the trend. If there's a huge trend and, we can't find it out there, we might step out a little bit further. Or, a special commodity item that's a little bit more specific to us, that's not easy. So it's also understanding your competitive landscape, because if you have something that works for off-price or X, Y, and Z, and they can't really get it from a lot of other resources, so it's knowing your competition and what they're offering also.
Okay, one more part to the question, sorry. Do you view the e-com component, the growing e-com business that's existing in the ongoing market as an enabler for the brick and mortar component, or something that in 5 years could be a threat to brick and mortar?
Can you read that? I didn't hear the beginning of it.
I didn't even hear it.
The growing e-com business that the country is going through right now, do you view it as something that's going to enable off-price 5 or 10 years down the line, or something that could affect the growth and expansion of?
So he wants to know where off-price fits in with the e-com boom. How that, like what you think about that. Harry, you want to take that one?
I was just going to say the e-com business is booming and has been booming. The off-price arena has been booming. So personally, I think that they're both going to be separate commodities, and they're on a personal opinion, I think it's not going to hurt
What
it.
kind of protects
Yeah.
off-price is that you can't emulate off-price and the treasure hunt online. You just can't do it. So part of what makes off-price fun is that people love to shop. They like to see things, feel things. Again, it's all about the product. And you can't go to an online website and be like, ooh, what am I going to find today? Really, it's not the same thing. Right, it's a different formula. So I think that, both are going to continue to grow. But they're very different in their own way.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Hi, how are you? Brands for off-price. Obviously, it varies category to category, but how inclined are you to even meet with a vendor that may not have brands, or that brands that are not appealing to you? I think that's...
I think it depends retailer by retailer. I think brands are important, but I think great fashion is also really important. There's a lot of brands out there that don't offer fashion. So again, it all goes back to who you're selling. So again, I think each retailer, that means a little bit something different too. But great fashion should really also be a very key driver within.
In the good, better, best, you better be at the good price point in that scenario, because the brands command more opening price point if that's the case, and good fashion, I think, would be
Well, off-price also is all about value, so the brands help validate everything else in our assortment. So if we were 100% unbranded, the customer would come in and they wouldn't really understand what value they're even getting because they don't know what to compare it to or where else they saw it. So for example, if they're seeing a brand in an off-price retailer, they know, oh yeah, I just saw that at Macy's or Lord & Taylor and they were 25 off. That was still 50% higher than this. That's great. Then they may go to an unbranded resource like, wow, the fashion quality is amazing. I don't really recognize this, but I love it. I'm going to pick that up too. And they can kind of compare. It validates the whole assortment. So brands are very important. But it goes back to what Keith was saying earlier about the FQBP, the fashion, quality, brand, and price. So if you have the fashion, you have the quality, and you have the price, you got 3 and 4.
So if you don't have the brand, you have to work a lot harder.
Your quality better be, and your fashion better be. Price better be.
So I think Keith mentioned that attention to detail was. Hi, I'm over here. Yeah, that attention to detail, where you would spend months and months talking about a polo shirt, for instance. What happens when you spend all that time and then you get into the meeting and the off-pricer who's trained to denigrate your item says, well, the customer doesn't really know the difference.
Can't be everything to everybody. And you know what? You can't be everything to everybody. You got to do your homework. You're going to do the best job that you can possibly do, and you're going to move on to the next guy.
What's the response to that buyer?
You know, it's you got to be humble. You got to be respectful in your answer, and you got to say, hey, you know, we spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of effort. You know, we've gone through product testing. You know, and I would always have comparable product laid out so that you could show, and actually I would really have product from their assortment laid out. But again, you gotta walk that fine line, because if you come across with a chip on your shoulder, you come across with any sense of arrogance, you know, they're just gonna get turned off because you're bashing, you know, what they worked on and what they did. As much as you worked on or what we worked on with the polo and perfecting it, there's gonna be buyers that are just gonna say, you know what, I'm okay, I'm all set. And there could be a lot of reasons for it. They just don't have the open to buy for that specific category. The category for them might not be working. You might not be forward enough. You know, they might not want just a basic polo. There could be a host of reasons. But as long as you did your work, it's not always going to result in an order. But move on to the next person. You know, move on to the next person. You just keep going. Because if you don't have that fundamental discipline set, where you going? You're winging it. You know, you're winging your business. You can't do that.
Thank you.
I guess I just wanted to add one thing to that. The theory is that everybody wants to try different things, and I get that. Within a company, you want to open up a new division, or you want to try to emulate different companies, and you sometimes you lose your way. And I think the most important thing and the most important characteristic I see with struggling companies is they don't stand for something. They're what I would call jack of all trades, expert of nothing. The market is not like that today. The market is very specific. You must be an expert at what you're doing. Of course, you have to try new things, but at the same time, you have to start dividing things up and canceling out things also. If you want to sell and do well in these stores, you must be an expert in that. You can't just do multiple different items.
I started my career in one category and spent 12 years focused on that category. I didn't expand to the next category until after I felt that I was an expert in my first category. So if you're proud of the product, doesn't matter what any buyer or any person says, you'll never be embarrassed in a meeting. Just become an expert. And the way to become an expert over and over again, shop, know your competition, understand what value you bring, and you'll never be embarrassed. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.